Just keep thinking, Blake. That's what you're good at. That's what I'm gonna say.
All right, cool. I'm excited. I'm really excited.
I could work that in though. Boy, I got vision, and the rest of the world has bifocals. That was a good line.
Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. He's Jason.
And I'm Blake.
You're both?
Yes.
All right. And I'm the narrator now.
Yeah. I will take on both roles.
Perfect. I will sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
All right. Let's
Cool.
go.
I'm really excited about this week's episode. This is very much off of the beaten path of where you and I maybe watch movies.
I would watch a movie like this every once in a while. It doesn't come into view that often in the list of movies that I want to watch.
Yeah, and I think this is a real treat here. So if you're unsure of the idea of 1960s films or westerns, I want you to stick around and enjoy this with us a little bit and see if maybe this is something to kind of tread into that territory a little bit.
It's a good one to tread into with.
Before we get started, though, I want to do a couple quick show notes from last week's episode. Soylent Green. After you and I finished recording, I finally put into words my problem with the film and why it didn't quite click for me.
Okay.
So, I think the biggest issue with the film is that it's constantly telling, not showing. And that's a really big problem that some storytellers have. If you're maybe an aspiring storyteller, that's maybe something just to remember, is that you really want to show the audience what you're trying to convey rather than telling them, because
telling them is a little too two-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think we can compare and contrast a little bit later on this, how invested I am in the characters in Soylent Green versus Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. With that being said, I think we can move past show notes and get into this week's film.
All right, let's
go.
go.
We did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, a 1969 Western. It's got a lot of comedic elements to it. Something interesting as well. I don't know about you, but I watched this on Disney Plus, and they actually listed it as a buddy movie as well.
Yeah, and that's very apparent, I would say.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's an interesting genre that I'd be very interested in finding some lists online about top buddy movies. But I have some interesting comparisons in who this movie is for that I'm going to get into a little bit later here.
Awesome.
So let's talk plot a little bit first.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is a story about two famous outlaws. They've been highly successful in robbing banks with their gang, the Hole in the Wall Gang, named after their hideout location in the canyons. When the banks start beefing up security, the gang goes after trains, who fight back with a vengeance. The two outlaws then go on the run from the law and the company.
Yeah. And I just want to add there really quick that it's not the train themselves going back with a vengeance.
Yeah, it's the owner of the trains and the company.
Yeah. Although, if somebody wants to make a horror film where the train fights back, I'm there.
There's a clip on YouTube about in Skyrim, they changed all the dragons into Thomas the Tank Engine. They can fight back with vengeance.
And they will.
Yeah.
Don't mess with trains. We can end the podcast there.
Yeah.
The moral of the story is don't mess with trains. So one thing that I want to say quickly before we wrap up plot is the intro of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid starts with a very old-timey, soundless picture film from way back when. I think they recorded this for the film, but I couldn't find a lot of information about that online.
It looked like it was just made for the film.
Yeah, and it most likely was. Don't be scared away by that. That's just the quick kind of intro to the film. It's kind of a
like a
homage.
intro.
Yeah, it's a character intro. It's a bit of a homage to the genre and its roots a little bit there. Don't be afraid of that.
Because this isn't really a like hardcore old school Western
No.
like they kind of hint at in that intro film.
Yeah, exactly. And again, after that, we kind of get the classic Western grain in the opening scenes, which is done extremely well. But after that, they move more into the color of the 60s, 70s. And again, don't be afraid of that kind of Western grain at the beginning there, because it's going to pivot into something you might be a little bit more used to. So, okay, so let's talk characters and people you may know. So we have to start with Butch Cassidy, the leader of the gang, played by Paul Newman. Let's start with Butch, a little exploration of that. He's kind of the charming, witty leader, very intelligent, which is constantly brought up how intelligent he is. Interesting enough, so he's kind of always the guy with a plan. Yeah. His plans very often don't go according to plan, and often go very wrong.
Yeah. He's got great ideas that they like execute the idea, and then it like fails like drastically. It still worked, but the consequences of it were not forethought.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
The actual plan happening, like blowing up a safe with way too much dynamite. It did work. Yeah. But there are unintended consequences.
Yeah, exactly. So Paul Newman, who plays Butch Cassidy, what an electric performance from him. Yeah. I was chewing on everything he was spitting out.
He was just great. Like, he's one of the greats from that time. Yeah. And it comes out strongly in this.
You may know him. So obviously from the 60s, he wasn't around in the 2000s for a very long time. But where you may know him from, he played Doc Hudson in Pixar's Cars, which is
no way.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. And part of the reason for that is in real life, he was actually also a race car driver.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a race car. He was a race car driver.
He was a race car driver, yeah.
I knew, like, when you look up pictures of him, you see him often with, like, cars.
Yeah,
So,
big car enthusiast. He actually won, I can't remember.
Like a Le Mans or something? That'd be pretty crazy.
Yeah, I don't know what he was driving or in what leagues. It wasn't NASCAR per se, but it was fairly competitive. And he was actually one of the oldest competitors to ever come first in a race. So kind of neat there. Also in the 2000s, he played opposite Tom Hanks in Road to Perdition.
I did not watch that one.
I haven't seen it either.
I would like to see him in his like at the end of his career, I guess.
Yeah. But he's known for so many other films, and a lot of these are back in the 60s or 70s. We've got The Hustler, Cool Hand Luke, and The Sting, which I'm going to bring up in a sec again.
We didn't talk about the salad dressings, though.
What?
Yeah, Newman's Own salad dressings.
Is that Paul Newman?
Yeah, that's where anyone who, like, I bring up Paul Newman to, I'm like, it's the salad dressing guy. And they're like, what? Yeah. So
You're lying to me.
No, Newman's Own are
oh like, my god,
and it's all like it's all like not for profit. And
that is
like,
Paul Newman.
Yeah, and all of the profits go to charity. Like,
right.
It's a really cool thing that he did.
And pretty good salad dressing as well.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I can't believe I missed that.
Yeah, I thought you were just trying to shut me up when I said like the salad dressings guy.
No.
But you just kept talking over me. But no, it's real.
That's amazing. Yeah. All right, Paul Newman, greatest actor, greatest salad dresser.
Yeah.
All right, next we've got Robert Redford playing the Sundance Kid. That's a familiar name that I feel like everybody knows, but I don't know before this that I could name a lot of Redford Robert Redford movies, to be honest.
You know what's amazing? He was across from Brad Pitt, who he was the Brad Pitt of his day, basically.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And he actually looks very similar to him.
Yeah.
But,
You know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of the blonde guy from Narcos who was then in Logan. If there was ever a remake of that, I think you could put him in there and Patrick Wilson as Paul Newman, because they kind of look alike too.
Yeah, I could see that working out pretty well. Yeah, Robert Redford across from Brad Pitt in Spy Game was a very fun movie.
Cool.
Which is more recent. It's 2001.
Yeah, and Robert Redford is also most recently in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. He doesn't have a large part by any means, but...
Yeah, he was in Endgame.
Yeah, exactly. Where he's actually most famous for is not only in front of the screen, but behind it. He directed the movie Ordinary People, which scooped the Oscars in 1980, the year it came out. So has some acting chops, production, directing, all of that. He's kind of got it all a little bit. I feel like he's a sex symbol for females everywhere.
Above a certain age, most likely, yes.
Yeah, but in general, Robert Redford is a name that you know, and this is actually the film that made him a major star as well.
So they actually had to change the name because of the two actors and how they were cast.
Yeah.
So it was originally the Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy, and Paul Newman thought he was going to be the Sundance Kid. And then when they couldn't get another huge name actor, and they decided to go with Robert Redford, who was in theater at the time, when they got him, they changed it to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and Paul Newman became Butch Cassidy.
Right. Okay. And Paul Newman, I could not imagine not being Butch Cassidy for this.
Yeah.
This role
and Robert Redford as the Sundance Kid, he killed it. It was amazing.
Both actors top of their game here. So the Sundance Kid, real person as well. The name Sundance Kid comes from the fact that he was once arrested in Sundance, Wyoming. So that's kind of a cool, interesting tidbit there. That's the reason why he's called that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like one of his first arrests or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a kid who got arrested in Sundance.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So next we have Catherine Ross playing Etta Place, who's Sundance's partner. Etta Place, again, a real character, spent a lot of time with the Sundance Kid, and she was along with a lot of his adventures and even took part in some of the bank robberies later in the Sundance Kid's life. Which is very interesting.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah. And Catherine Ross, you may know from The Stepford Wives, and not the shitty remake, but the 1975 original version.
Is it her head on the cover, on the film, poster? Because
it might be.
She's Stepford Wives, she has it's like a cut off head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was also a major character in Donnie Darko as well, another great film.
She was the doctor?
Yeah, she's the doctor.
I just am looking now, but yeah, wow, I did not know that. That's cool. I didn't make the connection at all. I love Donnie Darko.
Yeah, Donnie Darko's a great one. I haven't watched it in years, but anyway, the last kind of person that I really want to quickly talk about is George Roy Hill, the director of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He was actually upset that people found this film as funny as it was. He was looking for a more tragic tone because of eventually where these characters end up. So something kind of interesting is after the initial previews for the movie, they made some edits to cut some of the comedic parts down. So I would love to see the original cut with the comedic parts he cut out, because it must be a riot.
Oh yeah, it already was an amazingly funny movie, and just the connection these buddies have was just so awesome. To see their on-screen chemistry and all the lines that they're throwing at each other and their reactions to each other. It was. I can't imagine it being any funnier.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah, that's kind of the thing with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is, like, I immediately cared about both of these characters, and we're really excited to see where things went with them, and if they could outrun the law forever, or what would happen. And that's something that you really have to give credit for everyone involved being able to draw us in so quickly.
Oh, yeah.
George Roy Hill also partnered with Paul Newman on several other films. They were pretty close, I think.
Did they do any salad dressings together?
No salad dressings that I'm aware of, but they partnered on the movie The Sting, which also had Robert Redford together. So the two of them together. I think I need to watch that film, because that was one thing that I came out of this wanting more of, was those two together. They just did such a great job together. And The Sting also won some Academy Awards when it came out in the 70s. So kind of neat.
Yeah, I definitely, that might be like not a prequel or sequel section, but like legacy. We want to see more.
Yeah.
Of those actors. Yeah.
Exactly. And lastly, I wanted to quickly mention that George Roy Hill was behind the film Slapshot, also with Paul Newman. So for Canadian fans out there, yeah.
So he's been around for a long time then. I guess that was the
70s too.
I thought it was like 90s almost.
No,
I remember watching it like somewhat recently, and it definitely feels more 80s. I didn't think it was that.
The original Slapshot is 77.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I've never seen Slapshot, which is kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, so it's awesome that he went into that, because obviously his comedy works.
Yeah.
So, he went into that after this. He should have embraced his comedy in Butch Cassidy.
He should have pulled a Tommy Wiseau and just taken it for what it is with The Room, and just accepted that it's not like, this movie's not a dumpster fire, but Tommy Wiseau just completely embraced the fact that it's kind of a dumpster fire movie that's hilarious, that people can love. Maybe not necessarily for what he intended, but as long as people are paying for tickets, who cares? And enjoying it.
And I think what happened was, like, he wanted to make a serious movie, but then he got these two actors together who they're just like riffing off each other, I feel like, through the whole thing, and like they bring the comedic element. If it was other actors, they might have been more serious.
Or maybe their acting wasn't as tongue-in-cheek, like even just their facial expressions as they're doing things, like they're not hollow, they're very animated all the time. And I don't know that a lot of actors can pull that off in the same way that both of these guys were able to. But anyway, so there's two other brief mentions that I want to make before we get out of here. So first is the Hole in the Wall gang, the gang that Butch is the leader of. In real life, the Hole in the Wall is actually the location that they operated out of, and the gang was called the Wild Bunch Gang. The Hole in the Wall was in Wyoming. It was kind of this notable location used by a number of outlaws in that time frame. And the reason why it was so important is because it was kind of a naturally designed fortress where no one could approach without being detected. And that's because of the ridges and the geography of that area. There was really only one way in, one way out kind of thing.
Through the hole in the wall.
Yeah, basically. So really neat that that's a real area, and you could actually go and visit that and see that they actually even have the original cabin from the Hole in the Wall on it's at a museum, I think somewhere in Wyoming, but maybe Colorado. I can't remember that exactly. But anyway, the last person that I want to mention here that's really interesting is Sam Elliott makes his first appearance in film in this as well.
I did not see him.
Yeah, he plays a card player, And this is his first credited role.
At the very beginning of the movie?
No, that's somebody else. He's a different card player. I'm going to have to rewatch this and look out for him. And look out for him because Sam Elliott is a very recognizable voice and a very recognizable face. He's got to be the most cliche looking and sounding Western actor of all time. You know Sam Elliott. He comes from a bunch of different things, but cool first appearance.
That is really cool. William Goldman made Princess Bride. The director, he also made Princess Bride, I think.
No, that was Robert Reiner.
Okay, no, why is William Goldman referenced?
Oh, screenplay by William Goldman.
Yeah, so again, that's where like, all those interactions are very apparent in The Princess Bride, which is, again, like, not that long after this.
That's a great connection. William Goldman with The Princess Bride and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He actually won an award for his screenplay for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Oh, sick. He deserved it.
Yeah.
It's the writing and everything that really nailed it.
Yeah. We got to give credit where credit is due there, for sure. And again, if you enjoyed The Princess Bride, why not go check this out? You're probably going to enjoy it just as much.
That and The Sting, which is, again, another good buddy movie.
I am very excited to watch The Sting at some point now. All right, let's move on. Who is this movie for? Obviously, fans of Westerns. You know, why haven't you seen this one at this point? It's going to play a little different than maybe the classic Westerns, a little bit more comedic, but still should be on your list of things to watch. I also think that if you're a fan of the Red Dead game series from Rockstar, that you should be watching. This is probably a good gateway into Western film. And I don't know, if you loved the Western scenery from the game series, you're going to love this as well.
Yeah, they go to a bunch of cool locations. It almost feels like how did they I didn't look into the locations enough, but how did they get all those different, like, the varieties of scenes that they shot?
Yeah,
it was very cool, all the different areas they went.
Yeah, they did travel a little bit for that, and we'll talk about that in effects of filming. I also think that if you're a fan of true stories and biopics, this is a good one as well.
It depends on how hardcore you are about true story, because what I read is the writer for this, or the director, he was really interested in Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, and the Wild Bunch gang. Mm-hmm. But he wanted to tell their story, but he didn't really want to go into the actual details of what really happened, because it was very hard to actually find all of the information. Yeah. Like, sort through what was just lore and legend and what was true. Yeah. And so he's like, no, what, I'm just going to make a movie about it. And at the beginning of the movie, it says most of what follows is true, which, like, everyone else was doing, like, based on a true story type thing. So he's like, most of what follows is true. Yeah, the general locations where they were, the time frames, that kind of thing. But obviously, nobody was really there to hear them. And we don't really know anything about them. Yeah. Yeah, like, it was just two people who were, like, they are steeped in legend, though. Yeah, for sure. So, if you're a fan of outlaw or crime films, especially with the focus being on anti-heroes, again, couldn't recommend this enough. If you're a fan of very smirky, kind of tongue-in-cheek humor where you feel like you're in on the joke, I think this is a good one for you as well. Yeah, I think almost anyone could really watch this and enjoy it for the most part. There are certain areas of the movie where you're like, I don't love that. But it's the characters. It's so character driven. Yeah. And you really, like, feel attached to these two. Are you ready for my kind of out there? If you're a fan of this, maybe you should check this out. Yeah, sure. If you're a fan of The Wolf of Wall Street, I think you could follow up that with this and still kind of get some of those dopamine hits, some of that enjoyment out of that. Yeah, I could see that. Like, there's a few carryovers, like, it's, like, based in fact, or, like, based in... It's the evasion from the police, like, the idea of never doing the right thing until the bitter end. Yeah. And not changing who you are, and that even the humor is kind of similar. Yeah. I really think that you could have a movie night with the two of those and come out of that pretty happy. Yeah, I can see that.
And you actually touched on this already, and I'm kind of of the similar opinion that I think most moviegoers could and should see this at some point. It's one of the last best westerns of the time, and both Paul Newman and Robert Redford are just absolutely iconic in this.
Yeah,
and
they really are. And yeah, like it's like where the westerns sort of evolved into something modern.
Yeah.
Like, and that, like, we were focused on the characters and like not so much the actual like cowboy shoot 'em up type stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like they were eschewing into a new era.
Yeah. And for me, I think this is also a bit of a gateway western that it gets you really interested in the genre. There are certain movies, and I'm going to slot this one in there as well, that this makes me want to dive into every western ever made. And I've done that a few times with different other genres, but this is the first time that I've walked out of this and went, what other westerns can I watch right now? Yeah. And I'm going to maybe contrast that with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I watched that last year. And it was good. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that made me want to dive into the genre.
Okay, yeah, like I watched like another Clint Eastwood one. I forget the name right now. I mentioned it before on the podcast, but and I loved that one, but I didn't get that far into like everything else.
Yeah,
but that one is a good one. I'm gonna have to find that one.
Fair enough.
Just another like comparison, because this isn't as silly as Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
If you've seen any clips of that, or if you've watched that,
because Blazing Saddles is just a complete parody of the Western genre.
Yeah. So this is like the last, like, well, not the last, but like it's at the end of the serious time of Westerns.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the Clint Eastwood. It was directed and acted by Clint Eastwood. High Plains Drifter.
Okay.
That's another like really good, and it's like a spaghetti west. No, that one's not actually spaghetti western. Never mind. But it is a very good western. Very, like, that is another area you could go into after if you're going into westerns. High Plains Drifter, Clint Eastwood. He's a classic.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood was one of the largest or most prominent western stars of all time as well. So I think before we move on at this point, I think we have to do a bit of a trigger warning, maybe a little bit here. There's one scene in particular that gets a little rapey for 2022.
Yeah.
And it's not actually rapey, but the scene plays out maybe a minute or two too long. It's near the beginning. Robert Redford is in some woman's home, and she's surprised by him in there when she gets home from work for the day, and he pulls the gun on her and makes her do a strip for him. And like I said, it goes on a little too long for
it was just long enough for the effect, because it's not an actual, it doesn't actually, like,
they know each other.
Yeah.
She was waiting for him to come home, and this is kind of maybe some sort of little fantasy thing that they play out. They're both outlaws, basically, right? And
they're together.
And they're together. Yes, they're together before this scene.
But it could be uncomfortable to watch at first.
Yeah, I was kind of squirming a little bit in my chair, like, oh, I don't know about this. But just get through it. Maybe fast forward if you need to, but it's not actually a rape scene. It just feels very rapey. But anyway, when to watch? For me, I think this is a blockbuster movie night. Like, I think you can slot this in as your big movie that you want to watch for the evening. It's also a really good buddy movie. Mm-hmm. So if you're kind of looking for that kind of bouncing off of each other kind of thing, then this is another good spot for that.
Yeah, like would be something that I want to sit down and watch, just like in the same way that I did. I watched it like while drinking a bit of whiskey and like like just with my partner, and like it was just a really fun buddy movie.
Yeah.
Like a nice light evening, like a light night.
Yep.
So it wasn't like super intense. It wasn't a huge drama that I was looking for. I was looking for something like a little bit light and fun and interesting, and it fit the bill.
So where to watch? right now streaming on Disney Plus, Crave Stars, or Amazon Stars. I watched on Disney Plus. It looks fantastic on there, so I would recommend maybe trying that out. And now we're going to get into something a little different. We've changed our format a little bit here. We're going to actually talk spoilers next before we get into the themes, the effects and filmings, and all the other stuff that you've come to hopefully appreciate out of our podcast. But we're going to switch the format up a little bit. Let us know how you feel about this in the comments.
Basically, we're not gonna just like go into a straight spoilers section. We're just gonna move up the whole discussion because we are so excited to talk about everything. And so when we're talking about themes, we are trying to talk about themes without spoiling anything. So I think we're moving it up so that we can talk about themes in the full sense.
Yeah.
And then as part of our end discussion that we've done previously, that will kind of be throughout. And
okay.
It'll be more free and open about the movie. So, yeah, at this point, if you haven't seen the movie and you want to, this is where we're going to get into everything.
Yeah. So, again, hopefully you kind of have an idea of whether you want to watch this or not in that first spiel about plot, people you may know, all of that. And if you're still on the fence, maybe stick around, see if something piques your interest. But otherwise, we'll see you after you've watched this. Hopefully you enjoy the film as much as I did. Okay, let's talk themes really quick. It's not a huge, deep theme kind of movie. Yeah. It's obviously it's the relationship between Butch and Sundance that's really important, and that kind of based on a true story, telling what the general idea of what happened in their outlaw careers. One theme that I kind of maybe do want to discuss a little bit is not being able to escape your past. And that's something that when done well is really interesting. And I could almost compare that a little bit to the Cowboy Bebop TV show. I know the live action's out. I don't know if it's that great. I've heard very, very mixed reviews on that. But the cartoon itself, it really dives into that and it really does a great job about how your past is basically what makes you, and to try to escape that past is extremely hard, which is what we see with Butch and the Sundance. They escape the law. They've successfully escaped the law. They go to Bolivia. Yeah. And rather than starting new lives, they first start by robbing banks. And then after that,
they try to work a straight job.
They try one job. Yeah. And on the first job, it goes horribly wrong. And
they have to shoot up a bunch of robbers who are trying to rob them. They were supposed to be security in this.
They're security, and their boss is shot dead in their first job. So, unfortunately, they, at this point, just give up on the idea of going straight entirely.
Yeah. And they go back to robbing again.
Go back to robbing again. So, not being able to escape the past, or maybe that hubris a little bit. They've got that hubris that they can't be caught and that they've escaped.
And what, within themes, like the idea of being free, I guess that's like a theme that is ongoing because there's a whole Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head montage where they do the whole song, and it's sung by someone important back then. I don't know.
We'll get into that with score.
Yeah. So within that theme, they play that, and you see like how free they are because of how successful they've been in the beginning. And so everything they've done up to the point where the movie begins proves that they're just very successful bank robbers.
And at the time, they were the most successful, which is kind of wild and why this story was told.
Yeah. So we see them at their peak. Yeah. And they are on top of the world. They're free.
I think this is a very American movie, and part of it's for that reason, for the refusal to change your ways or anything like that. I think this is a very American movie.
Yeah, like they keep doing whatever brought them success, even if it's not anymore.
Yeah, and again, that's my comparison a little bit to the Wolf of Wall Street there. At any point in time, he could have walked away, but he didn't.
Yeah, it's like addicted to the status and the money.
Addicted to the Skux life.
Yeah.
effects and filming. For me, the effects hold up extremely well in this, especially from a movie from 1969. Now, obviously, this isn't sci-fi, doesn't have fantasy elements, anything like that. Really, the effects are the shooting, the trains, that sort of thing.
The horses, I guess.
Yeah, the horses as well, that sort of stuff.
The explosions weren't like you could tell that they were like not real. Some of them were very real.
Yeah, I was gonna say the one train explosion, which maybe my favorite scene in the film, and I want to talk about that in real detail a little bit later. Yeah. Let's talk about the scene really right now. From start to finish, by the end, I was crying. I was laughing so hard. Yeah. We get the second train robbery in this film. We have Butch talking to them that he's held them up and he wants the money from them. And then Woodrow, the same guy from the last train, is in there. And so they have this really funny back and forth where Butch is like, Woodrow, come on out, man. Or sorry, Woodcock is his name. Yeah. And so he's like, Woodcock, like, come on out, man. We don't need to do this again. Like, you know what the spiel, like. Yeah.
And he almost opens the door.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, it's just Butch.
Yeah. Like they're old pals at this point. We get the old woman from the train come out and start yelling at them. And so they grab her and she's screaming for Woodcock to let them out. Yeah. Turns out somebody's put their hand over the woman and Butch is screaming all of her stuff out. Like, help me.
I think they did that. Like, that was a good effects. Like, because it was still her voice.
Yeah. And we didn't know at this point because we're from Woodcock's point of view. Yeah. I was dying. I was like, oh my God. Because he opens the door and you see the mouth covered over and Butch is just beaming
because he's so smart. Like, that's his whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he outthought him, Woodcock, and got him to come out, whereas previously he had to blow the door to get him out, and that like messed up Woodcock a little bit. But going back to the shooting as part of the effects, the introduction to the movie and to the Sundance Kid, that whole first cards scene was just so well done.
It was tense. I was like, oh my God, like somebody's gonna die right now.
And then so Butch kind of talks Sundance down from shooting this guy who thinks that he's cheating and at a card game. And then so Sundance and this other card player are kind of in a standoff. Anyways, Butch kind of diffuses the scene. Yeah. Through being smart, I guess, kind of. Like, he just, like, makes it all kind of calm down. And then the card player is like, so Sundance, are you really that good with your gun, as he was leaving? And he shoots the guy's pistol out of his belt. Yeah. And then shoots it like three or four more times, just skitters it across the floor. Yeah. Like it was perfect. Yeah. So the effects of doing that really nailed how good Sundance is with his gun.
For sure. So yeah, all of that's fantastic. The scenery is great. It's beautiful. This is a beautiful film. It's filmed actually in several states. And the locations have since become popular film tourist sites as well, which is kind of interesting. So just a couple specific ones I'm going to hit on. The filming location for the railroad scenes is Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad in Colorado. This was actually also used in The Prestige and in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, like the kid, Kid Indiana Jones.
When he gets his whip scar.
Yeah, and his fear of snakes, all of that sort of stuff. Yeah. So that's a great film series, which we'll do at some point. But it was used in a number of other films as well. Very popular location at this point in time, and I can understand that with how gorgeous it is. We have the Animas River in Colorado, where the stuntman jumped into the river to be filmed. Yeah. That was pretty wild. That was a great scene as well. Yeah. Something else kind of interesting, not relating to the scenery, the locations, but Butch Cassidy's real-life sister was on set of this film while they were filming it.
Wow. Yeah. Was she at all, like...
She was in her 80s at this point in time. And she thought Paul Newman's portrayal of Butch was spot on. And she was very much a fan of his portrayal, and and just the whole direction of the film.
Oh, awesome.
So,
that's good.
Yeah, really
That's
cool.
Good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's wild too because you don't think about it, but the time frame of when they were doing this was by the end of the film, it's almost 1910, and so we're only about 59 years from filming.
Yeah.
We're at the same time period away from this film almost at this point in time, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, so they were really actually quite close to when the actual Western things were
the end of the Westerns. Yeah. This really, the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid are really at the tail end of the Western outlaw time period, really. Yeah. So all of that, super interesting. Let's talk score really quickly. Overall, I really enjoyed the score. All the songs are obviously from the 60s, but for me, they don't really feel dated for the most part. I think they really fit the feel of the movie.
Yeah, and it didn't make it feel old. It didn't take you out of it by any means.
Yeah.
It was just you get involved or invested in the movie, and it just seems right.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head song. Everybody knows that song. It was from B.J. Thomas. It was actually written for the film.
No way.
Yeah, very interesting.
I thought it was what I read was why do they have this full song in here? And I thought it was an older song, and they were using it well somewhat, but it was almost unnecessary. So it was written for this.
It was written for the film.
No way.
Yeah.
That is unreal. I had no idea.
And I kind of agree with your opinion. You alluded to this a little bit, that the scene where it's played maybe plays out a little too long.
But it really shows how free they were.
Uh-huh.
Because the whole song is about raindrops keep falling on my head, but the guy doesn't care. He's happy.
Yeah.
Everything's going well, even though it's raining.
The only thing I was going to say is that I almost don't like it in the film. Robert Redford famously hated the song and didn't want it in the movie. The studio themselves thought that this song was going to ruin B.J. Thomas's career.
Oh, wow. Did it?
No, it didn't.
Okay.
It actually did extremely well.
Yeah. The song itself.
Yes.
Yeah. So in the movie, I didn't hate that whole scene. It was a little long, but they played a whole song, and it was just like a random montage of Paul Newman being silly.
Yeah.
With Etta. Is her name Etta in the movie?
Etta.
It's our introduction to Etta, and it kind of shows the interesting relationship that the three characters have as they are about to embark on their journey to Bolivia and everything.
Yeah.
They were very close.
Butch and Etta were very close, yeah.
Yeah, and Butch, you could see how close Butch and Sundance are in their interactions with Etta, because Butch, he's into her, but then they've developed this relationship to the point where he is, he loves her as, a sister at this point, and he's, separated that, but they still have a little bit of playful flirtation.
Yeah.
And, Sundance is, he understands and everything's good.
Yeah.
But I thought for a moment that they were gonna fight or something like that over Etta.
That scene's really fun as well when they get back and Butch is like, I'm gonna steal your girl, man. Yeah. And Sundance keep her.
Have her.
I don't need her. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of great moments in this.
A lot of the lines. One line that Sundance keeps repeating to Butch is, "You just keep thinking, Butch. That's what you're good at."
Yeah. And it's slightly sarcastic. You do often get us in these horrible positions.
Yeah. And that is kind of all he's good at, is coming up with solutions or coming up with cool things to do that end up needing solutions.
Yeah. Let's do a quick look back at the times. So this is actually really the tail end of Western cinema, which was mostly prevalent through the 30s to the 60s. And we've seen some films since then that have popped up here and there. Most recently and most well done was probably Django Unchained.
Yep.
Also the True Grit remake in the late 2000s.
And there's some, the Hateful Eight.
Yeah. The Hateful Eight, I almost don't.
It
I have
is,
a hard
but
time
it isn't.
categorizing
Yeah.
that as a Western. And Django Unchained, if you've seen that as well, Django's got the Quentin Tarantino like hyper violence kind of sorry, it's a little bit of that hyper violence kind of genre where obviously this one about outlaws is going to be violent, but it's not extremely graphic like a Quentin Tarantino film is going to be.
Yeah.
And at the time, 69 when this came out, it had a very mixed reception from critics. And I think part of that is, again, we're at the very tail end of the Westerns. Everything has, at this point, has been said and done before. And at this point in time, I think that critics are starting to get worn out. And you can maybe draw the comparison here a little bit to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and critics starting to maybe fall out of love with the formula a little bit. Yeah. And that's not to say that this movie isn't great, because it is. I think that this is something where you could almost maybe compare to like a Star Wars or something like that, where it takes a lot of good components of other films and it kind of puts it together and makes it extremely relevant and timeless a little bit.
Yeah.
And uses a lot of other great ideas really effectively, where, you know, we could go back further. If you and I went back to the 30s, maybe we find a film that did this first and maybe it wasn't as good or as perfectly well executed, but
and I think that's all like where the characters came in and shined so much, because like watching a lot of, like, I've seen a few Westerns and you are only given this like badass character as like that's the character, and you don't see too much like of this human side, and these two were just so human and so buddy together. Like it was amazing.
Yeah. So I think this really helped my appreciation, having the two of them. I think having one Western star that you're supposed to be rooting for, it's obviously, it was important at the time, but I think having the two and having them bounce off of each other really added to my enjoyment.
Yeah.
So Legacy, really quick, the movie itself has been referenced well over 100 times throughout the past 50 years in film and TV. I actually found a spot on IMDb that shows every single time it's been referenced, and I had to scroll to get through all of it. Where it was most recently referenced was actually in the Marvel What If show. There's a reference where Tony says to Killmonger that those two are like a modern day Butch and Sundance, basically.
Yeah.
Something also kind of cool here is this was Paul's Newman's favorite film to be involved in. He had a ton of fun while they were filming this.
You could see it.
Yeah.
Like, that's what that's how it was so successful, was how much fun they were having.
Yeah. He said he drank a lot of beers down in Mexico while they were filming this too.
Yeah, probably. You kind of see it from time to time, I think.
Yeah. This is actually ranked 73rd best American film ever by the American Film Institute.
Wow.
It comes in 7th for the best Western, as well, approximately there in IMDb under the Western section as well. And Butch and Sundance are ranked the 20th in the greatest heroes of all time.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's a weird spot to put them, but
like, yeah, because they're anti-heroes for sure. Like, you're rooting for them when you shouldn't be, but like, of course you are. Like, no, what, they are kind of heroes, because like the whole idea of like the bank robbers was to like take from the rich, basically. But they didn't care.
You're really trying to fit this in hard.
Yeah.
You're overthinking this.
Yeah, I am. You're right.
They're heroes because of the stars of the film. They're not heroes in real life or anything like that. Don't go robbing banks.
Yeah.
Or trains, kids.
Do they even have trains anymore? I'm just kidding. I live in London. I get stuck behind trains all the time.
Yeah, true. I think the last point on Legacy a little bit here is, I think this was maybe one of the earlier kind of tongue-in-cheek, in-on-the-joke kind of films that maybe was also involved in the action kind of category a little bit, because all Westerns are action a bit.
And like suspense a little bit, and like...
And I think a lot of films, especially looking at how many times this has been not only referenced but parodied as well, that obviously this had a pretty big impact on that type of comedy, and it's kind of fingers kind of reaching into other areas, especially the Marvel Cinematic Universe and that tongue-in-cheek kind of humor.
Yeah, like using too much explosive, like that whole scene using too much of an explosive to open a thing, and like all the funny like quips that the characters had around that.
Yeah.
And then all of the like chase scene things where they're running away, and like all the lines that they say, I could see it being like, it is very quotable in itself, but I could see like why it was so influential and like highly parodied and referenced.
Yeah. Our group of friends is very much like that. Like that way of talking where everything's a joke and everybody's riffing off each other. I feel like that's really a lot of our interactions as a group.
That's very accurate. Like we're all like a little bit of a Butch and Sundance at different times.
Yeah, and maybe that helps our enjoyment as well a little bit.
Yeah, it's such a perfect buddy movie. Yeah, like any two friends could, like, you can see yourself in the pair.
Yeah.
What I don't know, I just want to get into this. It's not relevant to any points, but like just the quotes. Like
well, let's talk about that at the end. Well, let's talk about all of that stuff and then talk our personal reviews at the end.
All right, yeah.
We're almost there anyway, so the only spot that I really wanted to hit on really quickly was sequels, prequels, and reboots.
Okay, yeah, let's get
and then let's get into that in our reviews and wrap her up.
All right.
So sequels, prequels, and reboots. This is actually a remake of in and of itself from the 1956 film The Three Outlaws, which was reviewed really poorly. Not a big box office film, but tells the story of Butch, Sundance, and Etta. There's never been a remake of this, but there was a prequel in 1979, which horrible reception to that.
Yeah.
The only notable thing of that is that Hollywood's been committing the same sins of repeating itself for over 50 years.
Yeah. Just another example.
Yeah, and this doesn't need any sort of remake. This is perfect as is. Everybody's perfectly cast.
Yeah.
If you need a 2021 update of this, just go watch it on Disney Plus, because there's no way you're going to enjoy this more any other way.
Yeah.
I guess, what do you want to talk then next? Do you want to talk favorite scenes before we go into our personal reviews?
I think it's just part of my personal review is like talking about favorite scenes, because those are things that will like last. So like overall, I like anyone listening could already tell that we love this movie.
Yeah.
So my personal review is like, it's amazing, and what I loved most about it was the character interactions and the quotes that they kept like bringing up things and like repeating them and like changing them slightly over time. So one of the coolest things to me was, as they're running away, they kept saying, the first thing is like, who are these guys? So they're getting chased by like some really good cowboys or really good law enforcement trackers. Yeah. So they're getting tracked down, and they just like, they'll run away, find like a good hiding spot, like went through a river or up a little cliff or something, and they're like, we should be good here. And then they look back, and you could just see them on the horizon. That was a good effects in filming. It was like the filming of how they were so far away, you could see the horses coming after them. So
or their little torches and stuff like that in the evenings as well.
Yeah. So who are these guys? Was just like the delivery of it from both of them, I think, but mostly Butch and Paul Newman. Like, he killed that. And then they would stop, and like every once in a while they'd be like, I think we're safe. And then Sundance is like, you think so? And then Butch again is like, I will if you will. Like, both of them did that, where they're like, do you think we're good here? And we're like, I don't know. And they're like, I will if you will. Like, I'm good if you're good.
Yeah.
But then they kept going because it wasn't safe. It was just like a really cool interaction that they did a few different times throughout the like major chase.
It was a pretty great chase too. There's a lot of great moments throughout it. It maybe goes on a little bit long. It could have been a little bit shorter possibly, but that's such a minor critique. As well, I love this movie too. I've only really seen a few westerns, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Django Unchained, True Grit. Those are like the big ones watched. But for me, this is probably top of the list of all of those. We'll see. Time will tell. This is a movie that I immediately wanted to start over and re-experience, especially for the first time. It might fit in my top 20. It's definitely my favorite Western. Yeah. It might go in my top 20 eventually. So we'll have to see. A couple more rewatches, and those are definitely going to happen because, like I said, I absolutely love this.
I want to like show this to a few people. Like,
yes,
that's what I want to experience, is like watching it with someone.
I think the movie is definitely better in the first half. It maybe gets a little long in the second half.
I love the ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like it had its like strengths.
It has its strengths and weaknesses, but it's not like Full Metal Jacket level where it's like you completely you remember the first half, don't remember the second half. It's good throughout. It's just maybe some of the ideas they weren't able to continue everything as fantastically as the opening scenes.
And they tried something different in like the last act before they go out in like
the
Blaze of Glory.
Blaze of... Okay, yeah.
They had like a whole section where we were just seeing them rob banks, and it was like a silent movie kind of.
Right.
So like that part, like, did they really need it? Like we already know that they're these great bank robbers. They had some comedy in there, and like it kept you engaged. But like that was part that you wouldn't really remember or like look forward to on a rewatch.
Right. Yeah. And something of note here while I was watching the movie is I actually barely wrote anything while I was watching because I was enjoying the adventure a little too much. And
I was writing down quotes the whole time.
Yeah, that's fair. The plot's not particularly complex, really. So I also didn't really need to feel the need to write things down to remember the specifics later or to tie things in later. There is something really great about, there's a bit of foreshadowing later in the film. Etta and the kid have this interaction when she decides to go on the run with them and down to Bolivia. She says, I'll follow you, but I don't want to see you die. That's my only rule, is that I can't watch you die. And what's really great is later on when they go and they try to go straight and it fails the first time and they immediately say, we're going back to robbing banks. And Etta says, I'm ready to go home now. Yeah. And you just know that's the end. That's where things are going to go wrong, basically. They're going to die. You know, even that moment when she's saying that, I was like, oh man, like this is it. This is how things are going to go down.
It was like a little bit of a heart-wrenching or like gut-wrenching moment.
Yeah.
Like just a little bit, because it was like pretty accurate where like they weren't explicitly saying that like this is the end. If you don't leave, you're going to die. And so I'm going to leave. It was like she's like, I might head home ahead of you guys. Yeah. And like you guys can come back like if you can. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's kind of tearing up a little bit. They're like they're all sleeping. She's kind of like lying, facing away from them. She's kind of tearing up because she knows like these guys aren't ever going to change. Like they just can't help themselves from robbing people. Yeah, and
it's what they're good at.
Yeah,
and they're gonna go out as they lived. Like they're gonna keep going.
So that's a really great scene. That's one of my favorite scenes as well because, like I said, as soon as I saw that, I was like, this is it. This is how this is gonna go. Partner reviews really quick, and then we'll talk some scenes, some quotes, and stuff like that. That's how we'll end it. Jess had no interest in this movie. She didn't give it any chance. She put her headphones in, didn't want to watch a Western, which is unfortunate because it was probably the best gateway Western ever. Yeah. How did Annabelle like this?
She was mostly busy at the time I was watching it, so she didn't get that much. She wasn't able to get invested and sit down and watch. Just it didn't work out at that time. But I feel like she wouldn't have been like super in love with it like the way we would be. Yeah. Just based off what she likes, and she would be similar to Jess in that regard.
Yeah. I think you really nailed it earlier when you said that this is a movie that I want to show other people. And I think this is something that I will at some point watch with other people and be like, see, like, this is good.
Yeah, like I want to introduce this to a few different friends that would like maybe like this would get them into appreciating it. And like that's kind of why we're doing the podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is a great gateway into older movies, into Westerns, into whatever. And so I'm really glad that you and I were able to review this and that we kind of stumbled into this. We fell into this a little bit. So
I'm really enjoying doing this podcast because like we are two buddies who are watching the same movie. It's just not like together, but like, it's great.
We should have called this Butch.
Blake Cassidy and the Sundance Jason.
Yeah, there's another podcast name idea there.
You just keep thinking, Blake. That's what you're good at.
There it is. There it is. So let's talk our favorite scenes now and wrap this up. Butch taking back the hole in the wall gang. That's like for me. That's one of my first favorite scenes. You brought up the shootout scene at the beginning, which is great. But this is a scene that I'm gonna remember the most. Is they get back to the hole in the wall and they've been gone for so long that the gang is like, you know what, we don't need you guys. We can go and do our own thing. We're gonna start robbing trains now.
It's not that they don't need both of them. They don't need
Butch. They don't need Butch's ideas anymore. Yeah. The Sundance Kid is still one of the greatest shots in the West, so obviously they want to keep him. And they say that, and this whole scene just plays out so well, where they're like, Sundance, you can stick around once we've killed Butch, but and Butch and the Kid have a kind of discussion back and forth where Butch is like, if I die, kill all of them, and Kid's like, well, we'll see. But yeah, so the guy pulls out a knife, the new leader pulls out a knife and said, let's go, Butch. And Butch walks up and says, well, what's the rules? And the guy said, there's no rules. And as he's walking up, he boots them and they like nuts. And he's like, all right, well, no rules. Then this is how things are going, I guess. Like,
he said it. So, like it's just Butch's like fast thinking and like his intelligence, and like he basically knew this guy was gonna say like there are no rules. What are you talking about? This is a knife fight. So he took advantage of that, and he's like, well, you said there's no rules. So.
Which is perfect, because at that point nobody in the group can argue that at that point, because he said there's no rules. So
it's just like his intelligence of like running a crew kind of, and like taking down this like would be what's the word when like a crewmate
mutineer.
He's basically he's trying to mutiny, become the new leader. And he just like, outsmarts him. In like a silly, really fun way. So so I think that works so well, because we have one scene where we're introduced to the Sundance Kid. And like who he is and why he's like so good, and then you see the exact same type of scene for Butch.
That's a great point.
Like it was a good parallel to introduce them both on like an even plane.
For me personally, Butch is my favorite character for the thinking and all of that. I overthink things like crazy. Butch and Paul Newman just absolutely, like, that's what makes this movie for me. And I could very much see an argument where maybe the Sundance Kid is more important to you, but Butch...
like, he's still very funny, and he's like such a badass. Like, he really is good with his guns. And like,
and he's kind of like the gritty, like less animated than Butch, more real.
Kind of but he's also like very loyal, and like without having to say much, like you could tell like he's in this partnership just as much as Butch is. Like he needs Butch just for like enjoyment of what he's doing, or else it would be like a shitty like thing where he's just a killer. But like in this, he's not just a amazing shot and killer. He's like part of a team, and like they really work so well together. Like there's one scene, I forget exactly what, Butch says something like silly, and then Sundance is like, yeah, sure. And then like he's not talking much. Butch says like, how'd you become so talkative? And he's like, I'm just naturally blabby, I guess. It was just like such a well delivered line where it's like you could tell they were such good friends. And Sundance is a quiet guy, but he picked up on like all of like how their humor had merged. So you could throw it back at him every once in a while at like key moments, and like there's that like respect there and like friendship of that humor. It was just a great scene.
Their friendship is probably top 10 greatest buddy movies for me.
Oh yeah, definitely. I don't know who else like showed that chemistry so well. It like you see it a little bit in like some modern things like Spider-Man and Iron Man.
Even like the buddy comedies, I think, is maybe where you see the legacy a little bit more in those comedic duos, like our John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, our Chris Farley and David Spade. Those greats of the past, those comedic duos, I think I'll owe a little bit of credence to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid a little bit.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see if there had been a buddy movie previously that was as big.
Yeah. Getting back to scenes a little bit, we've talked about the train robbery scenes. Both of those are fantastic. The second one, I was crying by the time the train exploded because I wasn't expecting them to accidentally blow up the train.
Yeah.
And then when the kid says, "Bush, do you think you used enough dynamite?"
Yeah.
I was dead. I was dead at that point. Like, the whole scene.
It was an amazing scene.
And then it immediately switches into like this tense like chase scene where the cavalry comes and shows up. That was really well done. That was really effective.
Yeah, and like the people who were chasing them were just so good, and like they kept the suspense while also adding that little bit of comedy in. Like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
Like, just the way they kept repeating it. They're being chased by like Terminators almost.
Yeah.
They're just constantly always tracking, always finding them.
And we never see them either, which is really great.
Yeah.
They really hide their faces to make them this unseen, unknown killer.
And they're speculating. They're like, maybe it's that guy. He's supposed to be an amazing tracker, and maybe it's that guy. Like, he says, like, who's the greatest lawman?
Yeah.
And they're like, it's this guy. And he's like, does he wear a white hat? Yeah. That's him. It must be him. But they're still kind of questioning, like, who are these guys? How are they so good?
Yeah, they almost make them like better than human, like Terminators, like you said. And that scares us as the audience as well, because you almost have to have that after we've seen how effective the kid is at his shooting, that you need somebody who isn't human to beat them. Yeah. Which is really well done. Yeah. One of my other favorite scenes is the robbery scene in the Bolivian bank, because there's such a build-up, because they get to Bolivia. We know that the kid doesn't speak Spanish. We thought that Butch spoke Spanish, and he doesn't speak Spanish.
He like implied that he could read a menu or something like that.
And Etta, who was a teacher, can't speak Spanish. So we get this really great montage almost of her teaching them all these different Spanish words and phrases on how to rob a bank. Yeah. And it's kind of over time, like, and all these different like little mini scenes. And we see Butch, who's kind of picking it up. It feels like he's getting it naturally, and the kid just doesn't care. He doesn't show any appreciation for any of it.
Yeah. And then you find out that he's just has written down all the phrases, and he really didn't learn them all.
Yeah, Butch has just written them down, whereas the kid has actually remembered them all. He's just irritated with Etta.
Yeah.
So we get to this scene where they hold up the bank, and Butch starts trying to speak in Spanish all the phrases, but he doesn't remember what they actually mean. So the kid's yelling at him. You've already told them to go up against the wall. You've already told them to put their hands up. I loved that scene as well. That one's a great for me.
I also, another like similar thing was where at the end of like the first chase where they jump into the water, their whole interaction on deciding to jump or not, and like Sundance wants to stay and fight.
Yeah.
And because he's so attached to shooting people, like he's so good at it. He's like, I could probably take a few of them, and then they'd have a chance of running or something.
Yeah.
So they went through like all the options of like what their options were, and then Butch, I think, says, you know, they could surrender to us.
Yeah.
But I doubt it. Because they're considering surrender or jumping. And he's like, well, there is another option. They could surrender to us. It was just like such a prime, like well-placed comedic moment.
Yeah, and this movie is full of them.
Yeah.
The scene where they decide to go straight and their boss is shot right off the bat, basically. The reveal of Butch never having shot anyone. What a great reveal. What a great time to reveal that too.
That was really cool, yeah.
We're so late in the film, and then you think about it. As soon as you said that, you're like, oh yeah. Yeah, he hasn't shot anyone.
He doesn't even have a gun, does he? Like,
yeah, he has a gun. He just never shot anybody.
Yeah.
And him and the kid are kind of having that back and forth, like, all right, well, you're gonna try to take them. Do your best. I'm gonna kill everybody else.
That was unreal. Going back to the river, jumping into the river scene, them, like, it was basically voiceovers of them floating down the river, like it's a hardcore river. Yeah. And their interaction of just like get off my neck, like you're choking me.
Yeah.
And like that.
And they're nowhere near each other either. So that's actually something I always read the IMDb. One thing that I'll say is I don't want to bring up nitpicky stuff unless I notice it.
Yeah.
Like in the last episode with the woman being shot in the head and screaming.
That was hilarious.
It's not fair game if I didn't notice it or if you didn't notice it. But I still read them just for laughs. Somebody put a nitpicky thing where their two of them are yelling like, "Oh, get off of me!" And they're not anywhere near each other. Yeah. In my opinion, that actually works for the film. Like that they're yelling at each other, they're bickering even while they're like going down this river to their deaths potentially. Just a really great scene all around. Yeah, there's so many great scenes in general. The final scene where they go out fighting is great, and they're kind of having the back and forth, and Butch is like, you know what, I think I have a new plan, let's go to Australia. That's where we should go next.
Because like previously they're like trying to escape and they're like, we should have went to Bolivia, when I said let's go to Bolivia. And so it's like recalling that interaction, and they're believing their shtick. Like they're like, this is what we do. Yeah. Like, we're gonna get through this, and it's like they have to do that so that they can deal with the fact that they're probably about to die. Yeah, well, and they have no idea that the army's outside waiting for them. Like, when they go out guns blazing, they think there's maybe a few cops too. Yeah. Oh man, they're so dead. That ending to it was really cool. Like, you just hear all the gunshots, like, and the sergeant or commander of the army just like yelling "Fuego!" Yeah, that was fun. It just ends on the still of the two of them, which is actually the poster for the movie. Is them both running out with their guns blazing, kind of thing. Which is kind of cool. Yeah. Well, I already touched on the foreshadowing of their deaths with Etta leaving. In real life, she did leave and go back to the States, and there's actually quite a bit of mystery surrounding what ended up happening to her later in life. Oh, wow. So, that's fun. Kind of interesting, kind of neat. Yeah. Another, like, line involving Etta that I really liked was when the guys come back from the first chase, and she thought that they had been killed. And Sundance, he's like, don't make a big thing of it. And then, like, you kind of see her, like, disheartened, and he's like happy that she's like that in love with him, that she was like heartbroken that she thought he died. And then he's like, no, make a big thing of it, and then like goes in for a big hug. Like, that was like a cool, like, well-written interaction. That's really all I've got. Like, I've talked my favorite scenes. There's so many quotable lines. Do you have some more quotable lines you want to say before we wrap up? There's just like the boss of when they tried to go straight. He was just funny because like he spits and then gets it on himself. He's like, he's like, ah. He, like, multiple times he's like, damn it. He's just so funny. Yeah, even that little scene where he asks Sundance to test his shooting abilities, and you're like, oh, Sundance is gonna crush this, and then he kind of misses, and he's like, you okay if I move? I can only do it while moving. Yeah. So that was good too. Yeah. After the boss dies and they go back and kill the people who robbed them, they're like, well, we've gone straight. What'll we try now? Yeah. It's like they've tried all the options. Like, well, we tried it. Yeah. It's just like exactly like what we've been talking about, how they're just like, they give it one try. Yeah. The half-assed try, things go wrong, and they're right back into the things. Yeah, and then another line that Sundance keeps saying is, don't you get sick of being right all the time? Yeah. And like, it's just like, he says that a few times, and just amazing, like, their interactions. And then at the very end, when they're getting to the first part of the shootout, Butch is like, this is no time for bravery. I'll let you go. To go out and do something badass. He's like, this is no time for bravery. I'll let you go. Yeah. And they're having that back and forth of why the other one should be the one to go, kind of thing. Yeah. And then Butch realizes, wait, because Sundance is like, no, I'll go. I'll do it. And Butch is like, wait, but I can't cover you, so I have to do it. Yeah. Another great scene. Yeah. All right, well, that's all I've got. You want to wrap her up? This is actually the fastest podcast we've ever done. We got it an hour and a half here. Nice. We're trying to cut down here, so we're doing well. Yeah, yeah. We got some fun stuff coming up in February. Let's do a romance one this year. We just did one. It was a bromance. That's true. What's wrong with that? No, like, a real romance could be like, there's... I want to do
the rom-com When Harry Met Sally, because
I
I
haven't
love
seen
it.
that.
Oh, it's my favorite. I'll give you the DVD.
Yeah, all right.
So
I have nothing to play a DVD on.
All right,
None
you're
of my laptops work
Oh
for that.
my god.
Nothing.
Oh man.
I can't put that into my VR headset.
The 2022 technology coming to bite you in the ass.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we'll find it streaming somewhere, and then you can watch it through there. But that's what I want to do, and maybe next year we'll go with option 2, what we were talking about before.
I do have one last line.
Okay.
And it's from Ray, who was the sheriff of the town, I think.
Oh, yeah,
where,
yeah.
Like, Butch and Sundance were just at the top of their game, and, like, there's multiple scenes where, like, people in the town, they're not going to go after them.
No.
Because they know they're that good.
Well, and also to go after them, they know the hole in the wall is
it's
really
impossible.
impenetrable as well.
Yeah, so they're not going to follow that one lawmaker who seemed like a new person in town. But yeah, so the Ray is the sheriff of a town. I'm not sure if it's the same town. I think so. But
I'm not sure either.
They like break into his house and he's like, "Aren't you at least gonna like tie me up and stuff? Like you have to make this look like I'm not in like cahoots with you in any way."
Yeah.
And like you could tell he actually cared about the two because he's like, "Don't you get it? Your time is over, and you're gonna die bloody. All you get to choose is where."
Yeah.
And so like that's a great line for like the beginning. It was in the first chase.
Yeah.
Which was
First act of the movie, probably. Yeah,
it like finished the first act, I think.
Yeah. Where we know that these characters don't have any redeeming qualities that they're going to be able to change and grow beyond this.
Yeah, and I think he even says like you're one of the most charming guys, but it's not going to save you. Like you can't just get your way out of it, and everything's going to be great.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we see.
Yeah.
All right, cool. That's a great spot to end it. You can't change your past, and if you're a shitty person, you'll always be shitty.
Yeah, you just get to decide where you'll die.
Yeah.
That's it.
What a great way to end. What a high note.
Yeah.
All right, well.
Thanks for listening to Vintage Cinema Rewind.
Yep.
I'm Jason, and he's Blake.
Yeah.
But who are those guys? Who are those guys?
The men behind the mics. Yeah. We're still having a blast, so we're gonna keep going on, and we hope you guys are having as much fun as we are.
Yeah,
especially
let us know about how this format works a little bit, if it's a little more concise.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit more concise.
And a little bit more enjoyable because we weren't putting off like, we'll talk to that in this part.
Yeah, there's probably like 5 minutes of me saying that in Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah, literally.
But at the same time, some of these, I don't know. Let us know in the comments, but I feel like with some movies, the format of us trying to sell it using everything else maybe does make a little bit more sense, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, we'll have to keep experimenting.
Yeah, we'll keep experimenting. We've got plenty of plans for the future. But let us know. Let us know what we can do better. Let us know what we're nailing. Let us know what you want to see from us. Just please give us feedback.
Please.
We're desperate for feedback.
Interact with us.
Yes, interact with us. Talk to me. All right. Have a good one.
Signing off.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later. I don't know why I said we'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
That was weird.
We will talk to them later.
Okay, goodbye. Yeah, we're going to talk at you later.
Yeah.